I stared at the bathroom scale in disbelief. Another 3 pounds gone this week. That made it 30 pounds in total over the past 4 months, despite eating normally. At 5'7", my once healthy 145-pound frame had shrunk to an alarming 115, and I hadn't changed a single thing about my lifestyle. "Sarah, the turkey's getting cold." My husband Jack's voice echoed up the stairs. It was Thanksgiving, and we were hosting his family this year, including his mother, Diana, who'd been making snide comments about my weight loss for weeks. I smoothed down my now loose dress and headed downstairs, plastering on a smile. The dining room was full of cheerful chatter and the smell of traditional holiday dishes. Diana sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, supervising everyone's movements. "There's our disappearing daughter-in-law," Diana announced loudly as I entered, looking thinner than ever. "What magazine gave you this ridiculous diet idea?" "I'm not on a diet," I said for what felt like the 100th time. "I've actually been trying to gain weight." "Of course you have." Diana rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She grabbed my plate and began piling it high with food. "That's why you're wasting away to nothing. You young girls are all the same, starving yourselves for attention." Jack shot me an apologetic look but said nothing. He'd grown up with Diana's domineering personality and still struggled to stand up to her. "Mom, Sarah's been to the doctor about this," he tried weakly. "Oh, doctor chopping now, are we?" Diana scoffed. "In my day, we didn't need doctors to tell us to eat properly. We just did it." I pushed the food around my plate, fighting waves of nausea. The truth was, I'd been to 3 different doctors in the past month. Each one had run basic tests, found nothing obvious, and suggested it might be stress or anxiety. But something felt deeply wrong in my body, and nobody seemed to be taking it seriously. "Sarah, dear," Diana's voice cut through my thoughts, "do you know what eating disorders do to your chances of giving me grandchildren?" The table fell silent. My sister-in-law Jessica looked mortified, while Jack's father suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. "I don't have an eating disorder," I said firmly, setting down my fork. "And my reproductive plans aren't your business." "Everything about my son's life is my business," Diana snapped, including his wife's attention-seeking behaviors. First, it was those mystery symptoms last year, then the allergies that conveniently appeared when I cooked, and now this dramatic weight loss. "There's always something with you, isn't there?" "Mom, that's enough." Jack finally intervened, but the damage was done. I excused myself to the bathroom, where the nausea finally won. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, I heard Diana's voice carrying through the walls. "See, probably making herself throw up right now." Classic attention-seeking behavior. The following week, the persistent abdominal pain that had been my companion for months became unbearable. Jack found me curled up on our bedroom floor, unable to stand straight. "That's it," he said, helping me up. "We're going to the ER. No more waiting." The emergency room doctor listened to my symptoms with a frown that deepened as I described the weight loss, pain, and nausea. Unlike the other doctors, she ordered a CT scan immediately. "There's a mass," she said quietly, showing us the images. "A significant one. We need to do more tests, but this explains the weight loss and pain." Jack's hand tightened around mine as the doctor continued explaining. Words like oncology and biopsy floated through the air, each one making the room feel smaller. When the final diagnosis came a few days later, I insisted Jack call his mother to come to the hospital. Diana arrived in her usual flurry of self-importance, probably expecting another dramatic episode she could dismiss. The oncologist, Dr. Chen, was reviewing my scans when Diana burst in. "What attention-seeking drama are we dealing with now?" she started, but her voice trailed off as she saw the serious expressions in the room. "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Chen addressed Diana directly, "I'm showing these scans because Sarah wanted you to understand. This mass here," she pointed to the screen, "is a rare type of gastrointestinal tumor. It's been growing for months, possibly longer, interfering with nutrient absorption and causing the significant weight loss you've been attributing to attention-seeking behavior." Diana's face went pale as the doctor continued explaining the aggressive treatment plan we'd need to start immediately. The fork she'd been using to eat her lunch from a hospital cafeteria clattered to the floor. But she's too young," Diana stammered. She was just being dramatic about dieting. "No, Mrs. Thompson." Dr. Chen's voice was firm. Your daughter-in-law has been very ill, trying to tell everyone something was wrong. The question now is, are you ready to listen and support her through what comes next? I watched as Diana sank into the nearest chair, her perfectly maintained facade crumbling as the truth of her behavior over the past months hit her. Jack stood beside me, his hand steady on my shoulder, as we waited to see how his mother would handle the reality that her attention-seeking daughter-in-law had actually been fighting for her life all along. The first round of chemotherapy began 3 days after the diagnosis. Diana, still reeling from her misconceptions being shattered, appeared at the hospital carrying a large bag filled with organic snacks and ginger tea. For the nausea, she said awkwardly, hovering by the door of my treatment room. I did some research. It was the first time I'd ever seen her uncertain about anything. The usually commanding woman who'd spent months belittling my symptoms now seemed lost, watching as nurses connected tubes to my port. You can sit down, I offered, gesturing to the chair beside me. Jack had gone to get coffee, and the silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. Diana perched on the edge of the chair, fiddling with her designer purse. I keep thinking about Thanksgiving, she finally said. About all the things I said. You mean about me starving myself for attention? The words came out sharper than I intended, but months of dismissal and criticism had left their mark. She flinched. Sarah, do you know what it felt like? I continued, the words pouring out as the chemotherapy drugs began flowing into my veins. To have something wrong with your body, to be terrified, and have your mother-in-law tell everyone you're just being dramatic. Tears filled Diana's eyes, her carefully applied mascara threatening to run. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. When Dr. Chen showed those scans. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I've never been wrong before. At least I never admitted to being wrong. That's an understatement, I muttered. My friend Patricia, Diana continued, her daughter-in-law actually did have an eating disorder. She used illness claims to hide it. I assumed. You assumed I was like her, I finished, without ever really listening to me. The machine beside us beeped, marking the progress of my treatment. Diana watched it with frightened eyes, perhaps finally realizing the seriousness of what she dismissed for so long. Jack returned with coffee, stopping short when he saw us talking. Over the next hour, he watched in amazement as his mother, who had never served anyone in her life, adjusted my blankets, offered me ice chips, and held a basin when the nausea hit. The following weeks brought more changes. Diana attended every chemotherapy session, armed with new research and questions for the doctors. She joined online support groups for families dealing with gastrointestinal tumors and, surprisingly, started a journal documenting my symptoms and responses to treatment. Mom's gone full nurse mode, Jack commented one evening after she'd left our house stocked with prepared meals and cleaning supplies. I've never seen her like this. She's overcompensating, I said, too tired to sugarcoat it. She feels guilty. As she should, he replied, helping me to bed. The chemotherapy was taking its toll, making me weaker than I'd ever been. The turning point in my relationship with Diana came during my 6th treatment session. I was particularly sick that day, the side effects hitting harder than usual. I can't do this anymore, I sobbed as another wave of nausea hit. It's too much. Instead of her usual push to stay positive or offering practical solutions, Diana simply held my hand. You can be done if you want to be, she said softly. This is your battle, Sarah. We'll support whatever you decide. I looked at her in surprise. This wasn't the controlling mother-in-law I knew. But you've been so invested in the treatment plan. Because I'm trying to fix my mistake, she admitted. I spent months telling you how to feel, dismissing your experience. I won't do that anymore. This is your journey. That moment marked a shift in our dynamic. Diana stopped trying to manage my illness and started actually supporting me through it. She learned to listen when I described symptoms instead of jumping to conclusions. When other relatives suggested I was being negative for discussing my struggles, she surprisingly became my defender. Sarah isn't being negative, I overheard her telling my aunt-in-law on the phone. She's being honest about her experience, and we're going to respect that. During a particularly rough night when Jack had to work late, Diana stayed with me. As I lay on the bathroom floor, too weak to move after being sick, she sat beside me, gently stroking my back. I keep thinking, she said quietly, about all the signs I ignored. The weight loss, the pain, the fatigue. You were asking for help in every way you could, and I was too busy judging to hear you. I turned my head to look at her. Why did you always assume the worst about me? Diana was quiet for a moment. Control, she finally answered. If I could blame your symptoms on attention seeking, I could control the situation. The reality, that you were seriously ill, that was something I couldn't control. And I'm not good with things I can't control. 6 months into treatment, Dr. Chen called us in to review my latest scans. Diana insisted on being there, clutching her symptom journal like a lifeline. The tumor had shrunk significantly, but the victory came with a cost. My body was ravaged by the aggressive treatment, weighing even less than when we started. The good news is the tumor is responding, Dr. Chen explained. But we need to discuss long-term recovery plans. Diana's hand shot up like a student in class, but she caught herself, looking at me first. Sorry, old habits. This is your appointment, Sarah. I smiled weakly. Go ahead. As Diana discussed nutrition plans with Dr. Chen, I noticed how different she was from the woman who berated me at Thanksgiving. Her designer outfits had been replaced by comfortable clothes suitable for long hospital stays. Her perfectly manicured nails were now practical and short. She transformed from a controlling mother-in-law into something resembling a real mother. I have a suggestion, Diana said on the drive home. But I want you to feel free to say no. She took a deep breath. Would you consider staying with us during your recovery? The guest house has been empty since Dad renovated it, and it would give you privacy but keep you close to help. I glanced at Jack, who looked as surprised as I felt. Diana's guest house was her pride and joy, usually reserved for her elite social circle. You don't have to answer now, she added quickly. Just think about it. 2 weeks later, we moved into the guest house. To everyone's shock, Diana had completely renovated it for my needs, installing handrails, stocking the kitchen with appropriate foods, even creating a peaceful garden space for my recovery. The garden was Mom's idea, Jack told me one evening. She researched healing gardens, actually hired a specialist in therapeutic landscaping. The biggest surprise came during a family dinner, when Diana's sister Margaret started making comments about my appearance. Still so thin, Margaret clucked. Maybe if you made more of an effort to eat normally. Actually, Diana interrupted, her voice sharp. Sarah's weight is a direct result of her battle with cancer, which she's fighting with incredible strength. If you can't be supportive, Margaret, perhaps you should skip these dinners. The table fell silent. Diana had never publicly contradicted her sister before. Margaret sputtered, I was just trying to help. No, Diana cut in. You were doing exactly what I used to do, making judgments without understanding. I was wrong then, and you're wrong now. Later that night, I found Diana in the garden, tending to the herbs she planted for my tea. Thank you, I said, for standing up to Margaret. I should have done it sooner. With everyone who ever doubted you. She patted the bench beside her. You know, I spent years being the family matriarch, thinking I knew best about everything. It took almost losing you to realize how little I actually knew. As my strength gradually returned, Diana's transformation continued. She became an advocate in the local cancer support community, specifically focusing on young patients whose symptoms had been dismissed. She started a support group for mothers-in-law of cancer patients, helping other women avoid the mistakes she'd made. 1 year after my diagnosis, I was strong enough to host Thanksgiving again. This time, Diana worked alongside me in the kitchen, following my lead. Remember last year? She asked, chopping vegetables. I was so horrible to you at this very table. You've changed since then, I replied. Because you taught me something valuable, she said, putting down her knife. You taught me that being strong isn't about controlling everything and everyone. Sometimes it's about admitting you're wrong and learning to listen. The dinner table that year looked very different. Instead of Diana at the head of the table, we all sat in a circle. When Margaret started to comment about someone's cooking, Diana shot her a warning look, and she quickly changed the subject. During dessert, Diana clinked her glass for attention. I want to say something. She turned to me. Sarah, a year ago, I was the worst kind of mother-in-law. I was cruel when you needed kindness, dismissive when you needed support. But you gave me a chance to learn and change, even after everything I'd done. You didn't just survive cancer, you helped me become a better person. There wasn't a dry eye at the table as she continued. So this Thanksgiving, I'm grateful for second chances. I'm grateful for doctors who prove mothers-in-law wrong. And most of all, I'm grateful for a daughter-in-law who showed me that real strength isn't about being right, it's about being there for each other. Jack squeezed my hand under the table as I looked around at our transformed family. The tumor had changed more than just my body. It had rebuilt relationships I thought were permanently broken, teaching us all that sometimes the hardest battles bring unexpected healing. Diana caught my eye across the table and smiled, not her old, controlling smile, but a new one, full of understanding and genuine love. We had both survived this year, emerging stronger not despite our struggles, but because of them.